Hello, folks. This is a tale of destiny, broken hearts, and the hard miles it takes to find your way back, set deep in the unforgiving spine of the old American West. It follows an Apache man and a white woman who once loved each other, fiercely lost everything they had and crossed paths again years later, caught between danger, unfinished pain, and the fragile hope of beginning again. Before we step into this road, take a moment to like this story and subscribe so you won't miss what comes next. And tell us in the comments where you're listening from and what hour the clock reads where you are. It means more than you know to share this trail with listeners across the world. Now let's begin. The sun burned high above the Mescalero hills, hammering the land like molten iron. The wind dragged dust through the air, stinging the eyes and carrying the sharp taste of sage and rust. Somewhere overhead, a hawk screamed once, a short, cutting cry swallowed by the heat. June Calder's wrists were torn and bleeding where the rope bit deep into her skin. The men who abandoned her hadn't even bothered to give her shade. They'd tied her to a fence post beside an old creek bed, nearly dry now, just a thin smear of mud winding through cracked stone. Her tongue felt swollen, her mouth thick with thirst. Sweat blurred her vision, but she was afraid to close her eyes, afraid she wouldn't open them again. Flies crawled along her lips. She tried to whisper for help, but nothing came, only a dry rasp trapped in her throat. Her thoughts drifted to her father, Edwin Calder, too proud, too stubborn for his own good, and to the Calder name that once carried weight across New Mexico. That name meant nothing now. The ranch was gone. The money was gone. And the debts had become a noose in the hands of Silas Crow, the man responsible for leaving her here to die. Crow hadn't needed her money. What he wanted was what her father had refused to sell, the land beneath the ridge, where silver veins cut through stone like scripture. When he couldn't buy it, he took everything else. Now he wanted the last thing she had left. The map her father had drawn before his death, the only proof of what truly lay beneath those hills. When she refused to tell Crow where it was hidden, he had smiled and said, "You'll change your mind before sundown." That had been yesterday. She didn't know how long she drifted in and out before a sound reached her, a slow, steady rhythm of hooves, beating through the heat like a distant heart. June lifted her head, the world swimming. For a breath, she thought it was a mirage. Then she saw him. A lone rider crested the ridge, his outline sharp against the pale sky. He rode a dust-colored Mustang, lean and scarred by miles, much like the man astride it. No uniform, no badge, just a wide-brimmed hat, a sun-faded shirt, and the look of someone shaped by the land itself. He pulled the reins when he spotted her frozen in place. For a long moment he didn't move. June couldn't tell if he meant to help her or leave her behind. Then he dismounted, boots crunching against dry earth. She tried to speak. All she managed was a whisper. "Water." He uncapped the canteen, knelt and tipped it to her lips. The first drop struck her tongue like salvation. She coughed, drank again, drank until her chest ached. When she finally opened her eyes, fully her breath caught. "Tarek," she whispered. He stopped pouring. Her voice carried his name between them, like a ghost. He didn't answer. His dark eyes, marked by Apache blood, and something older, searched her face as if testing whether she was real. Then he rose, blade flashing briefly as he cut through the rope. Her arms went slack, too weak to hold her. He caught her before she fell. His hands were rough, familiar. The touch collapsed 5 years of memory into a single, crushing moment. 5 years since she'd left without a word. 5 years since he'd looked at her like she'd split his world in two. "June," he said quietly, his voice coarse as gravel. He guided her to a fallen log by the creek. She tried to explain, but her throat burned. "I didn't think I'd—" "You shouldn't be here," he cut in, not looking at her. He wet a handkerchief and pressed it gently to the raw cuts on her wrists. "This land isn't safe right now." She gave a thin, brittle laugh. "I'm starting to notice." He glanced at her, once quick, unreadable, then turned to scan the horizon. "Did they hurt you?" Only my pride, she said, her voice shaking between defiance and shame. Tarek didn't answer. He tightened his saddle cinch, drew a slow breath, weighing something heavy inside him. For a moment she thought he might ask what happened, why she was there. Instead, he reached for the reins. "You'll be all right now," he said. His eyes stayed on the open land. "Follow the creek east. It'll lead you to the road before dark." June blinked. "You're leaving." He gave a single nod. "There's nothing out here for either of us." With that, he swung into the saddle. Ash shifted beneath him, restless, ready to move. June wanted to call out to spill every word she'd swallowed for years, but they knotted tight in her chest. All she managed was his name, again softer now, almost a plea. "Tarek." He paused for the briefest breath. The wind lifted the brim of his hat, teasing loose a strand of his long black hair. Then he urged the horse forward without looking back. June watched until heat and light swallowed him whole. The hoofbeats faded, replaced by the low hush of wind through dry reeds. Despite the blazing air, she felt cold. She tried to stand, but her legs buckled. She crawled to the creek's edge and splashed muddy water over her face. The ripples showed a woman she barely knew. Dust-streaked, sunburned eyes too worn to hold fear anymore. "Nothing out here for either of us," she murmured. "That's what you think." Her gaze traced the faint line of hoof prints dissolving into sand. Memories pressed hard, 5 summers back, the smell of rain, the way his laughter echoed through the canyon. The night she slipped away, while he slept to protect him from men who would have strung him up for loving her. He hadn't known then. Maybe he never would. But staring into the endless sweep of sand and sky, one truth cut clean. Tarek might ride on without her, but June Calder wasn't finished. Not yet. She tore a strip from her sleeve, bound her raw wrists, and forced herself upright. The horizon shimmered, heat and dust stretching east. "Follow the creek," he'd said. She looked once more toward where he vanished, then started walking slow, stubborn. Her shadow dragged long behind her. The sun dipped low, bleeding red over the hills. Somewhere ahead, a man she once loved, and maybe still did, rode toward a life that didn't want her. But June had learned something about deserts. Walk long enough, and even the driest river finds water again. By dawn, the sun crept over Mescalero Ridge. She found the trail hoofprints, half buried, running east the same way he'd gone. Her legs shook with thirst and heat, but pride held her upright. Each step burned. The ache in her chest burned worse. Near mid-morning, smoke curled up from a small camp by a dry wash. One horse, one rider. She knew before she saw his face. Tarek crouched beside a fire, a coffee pot balanced on a rock. Ash grazed nearby, tail flicking. When he looked up, there was no surprise, no welcome, only a slow narrowing of his eyes. "You again." June dropped her torn hat into the dirt. "You left me without a gun, without a horse, with men hunting me. What did you expect? Die politely?" "I told you where the road was," he said flatly. "I couldn't make it." "That's not my problem. It is now." She shot back, "Because I'm here." He sighed through his nose, poured coffee into a tin cup, took a long swallow. "You shouldn't follow me, June." "That wasn't advice," she said, folding her arms. "That was an order. And last I checked, you don't get to give me those." His jaw tightened, a muscle jumping near his cheek. For a heartbeat, something passed between them. Not anger exactly, but the old habit of knowing each other too well. He looked away, poked at the fire. "Suit yourself. Just don't slow me down." She sank onto a rock, breathing hard. He poured another cup and handed it to her without meeting her eyes. The coffee was bitter gritty. She drank anyway. It tasted like the years between them. "Thank you," she said quietly. He didn't answer. The wind brushed the mesquite leaves, carrying the faint promise of rain that never came. Far-off thunder grumbled beyond the hills. June studied him, the hardened lines of his shoulders, scars at his wrists, the length of his hair. He wasn't the boy she'd known. Time had burned away, the warmth leaving something leaner, quieter, dangerous. "You've lived out here all this time," she asked. "Doing what?" "Breathing." She huffed. "Still not fond of talking. Still not fond of listening," he said, voice dry as dust. Despite herself, she almost smiled. For a stretch, neither of them spoke. The fire popped and hissed. A hawk shrieked overhead, and the land seemed wide and hollow around them. At last, June broke the silence. "Aren't you going to ask why I was tied up by a creek?" Tarek gave a small shrug. "I can figure it out." He lifted his cup. "Go on then. Your family's always been caught in something bigger than they could handle." His voice stayed level, but there was an edge to it. "Deals. Land. Silver. Same story as half the folks who pushed west dig too deep and end up buried by it." Her throat tightened. "So that's all you think I am," she said. "My father's mistakes." He looked at her, then steady and unflinching. "I think trouble follows certain names, and Calder is one of them." The words cut deeper than she expected. "You don't know everything that happened." "I know enough." "No, you don't." She set her cup down hard. "If you did, you wouldn't look at me like I deserved what they did to me out there." "Maybe I wouldn't," he said. "Maybe I still would." Their eyes held 5 years of silence, packed tight between them. The wind shifted, bringing dust and the promise of a storm. At last, Tarek broke away, tossing the rest of his coffee into the flames. "Pack up. We move before noon. I didn't say I was going anywhere with you." He turned fully toward her, his voice low. "If Silas Crow sent men after you, they won't be far. You stay here. You die. You ride with me. Or maybe you don't," he added. "Your call." She hated that he was right. Hated how his calm stripped her bare. Still, she nodded once, stiff. "Fine. I'll ride with you for now." Tarek gave a short nod, turned to Ash and tightened the cinch. After a moment, he reached into his saddlebag, pulled out a small pouch of jerky and tossed it to her. "Eat. You'll need the strength." She caught it awkwardly, fingers numb. "Always the gentleman. Don't confuse it with kindness." "Oh, believe me," she said, "I won't." They rode most of the afternoon in silence, following the dry wash north where cactus thickened and the land tilted toward the ridges. Heat shimmered off the sand. Every breath felt like swallowing glass. June's borrowed mare stumbled twice on loose rock, but Ash never missed a step. Near sundown, they reached a stand of juniper. Tarek called a halt, dismounted, and gathered deadwood. June slid from the saddle, rubbing her aching knees. "How much farther to town, Idris?" he said. "Another day if we're lucky. And if we're not, Crow finds you." "Before we get there." "Us," she corrected. He glanced back over his shoulder. "Don't make this about us, June. It already is." He said nothing, building the fire in silence. When the flames caught the orange light, softened his face for just a moment. She caught herself staring. "Why did you come back here?" she asked quietly. "After everything, after they blamed your people for the killings." He poked at the fire. "This is still my land. Doesn't matter what they call it." "Does it ever get easier?" she asked, being caught between worlds. He met her eyes, and for once there was no anger there, only a worn honesty. "No. You just learn which side hates you less." The words hit harder than she expected. She looked down at her scraped, dirty hands. "Maybe that's why we understood each other once." Once, he echoed softly. He stood brushing dust from his palms. "Get some rest. I'll take first watch." The fire burned low. June lay wrapped in his spare blanket, staring up at the stars through the branches. The air had cooled, carrying creosote and the faint scent of rain. She heard him moving at the edge of camp, every step careful, quiet. She thought of the boy he'd been laughing reckless, calling her Sunbird when she slipped out to meet him by the creek. He'd taught her to track rabbits, to read the wind. She'd taught him how to read words on a page. They'd believed love could stretch a world beyond its walls. They'd both been wrong. And yet lying there now, she knew the ache in her chest wasn't only regret. It was relief. He was alive. That was more than she'd ever dared to hope. Somewhere far off, thunder rolled again. June turned toward him and whispered, mostly to herself, "You still don't know why I left." He didn't answer. Maybe he hadn't heard. Then after a long stretch of quiet, his voice came through the dark, low even. "Get some rest, June. Tomorrow will be harder." At dawn, pale gold light sliced across the desert. They broke camp without a word, moving with the easy rhythm of two people who had once done this together long ago. As they mounted, she glanced at him despite herself. "You really think I'll slow you down?" He adjusted the reins, eyes forward. "I think you already have." She almost laughed. Half insult, half memory. "You're welcome." He gave her a sidelong look, the faintest ghost of a smile touching his mouth. Then he urged Ash on, and they rode north into the morning, their shadows stretching long behind them. Neither spoke yet. The desert seemed to hum an old rhythm, stirring again. And for the first time in years, June felt the uneasy pull of a man she'd thought she'd lost forever. The town of Las Beatriz lay low and quiet beneath the noon sun, a thin ribbon of smoke rising from its few chimneys. The street was little more than dust between weathered buildings, a saloon, a church, a feed store, and the Mescalero diner, its faded red sign creaking on rusted chains. June caught the smell of coffee and hot grease before they reached the main drag. The place was rough cowhands slouched outside the saloon wagons, rattled past chickens scattered in the dirt. She hadn't seen a town in weeks, and even this forgotten outpost felt like civilization. Tarek reined Ash in by the hitching post. "This is where we part," he said simply. June swung down from her borrowed mare, brushing dust from her skirt. "Part? You said you'd see me safe." He met her eyes unmoved. "You're safe now." She wanted to argue, but his tone shut the door. He turned, leading his horse toward the livery. Without another word, he was gone, swallowed by heat and hoofbeats. For a long moment, June stood alone in the street, anger and confusion curling up like smoke. Fine, she thought. Let him disappear again. She squared her shoulders, stepped into the diner, and asked the woman behind the counter if she needed help. The broad-shouldered owner, Rosa Vale, studied her before asking, "You can carry plates, wash dishes?" "I can do both," June said. Rosa's mouth curved faintly. "Then you start now. The mine boys eat like wolves." And just like that, June Calder became a waitress in Las Beatriz. By late afternoon, she'd poured enough coffee to fill a trough. Outside the heat shimmered. Inside the air smelled of bacon and tobacco. When the doors swung open, she barely looked up until a familiar voice said, "Coffee." Her hand froze on the pot. Tarek sat near the window, hat low, the same dust-stained shirt from the trail. For a second she wondered if he'd come to check on her, but his expression said otherwise. He didn't even look up. "You again," she muttered, filling his cup. "You working here now, apparently." He took a sip, grimaced. "Too bitter." "Then maybe don't drink it." He almost smiled. "Still got that tongue." "And you still know how to make an entrance," she said. "Can't seem to avoid me, can you?" He glanced up then, just a flicker of softness, before dropping his gaze again. "Guess the desert's not big enough." Rosa came by, wiping her hands on her apron. "You two know each other?" June hesitated. "Once." Rosa's eyes sparkled. "Good. Then you can show him the barn out back. My husband keeps extra feed there. We could use a man who knows horses." "I'm not looking for work," Tarek said. Rosa shrugged. "Then don't take pay. Stable your horse for free." He considered it once. "Fine." June felt her cheeks warm. "Wonderful," she muttered. "Now we can run into each other every day." The days that followed rolled by like tumbleweeds, restless, unpredictable. Each morning, June served miners, ranchers, and drifters, her apron stained with coffee and dust. And every afternoon, she caught sight of Tarek behind the diner, brushing horses, mending tack, speaking little. They talked only when they had to short, sharp exchanges, heavy with things neither of them said. One morning, as June Calder carried a tray of biscuits past a loud table of miners, a red-faced man, reeking of whiskey, grabbed her wrist. "Hey there, sweetheart," he slurred. "You ain't from around here, are you?" "Let go," June snapped. He laughed and tightened his grip. "Don't be shy now." Before she could pull free, boots struck the floorboards hard. Tarek was suddenly beside her, his hand locking around the miner's wrist like iron. She said, "Let go," he said. The miner sneered. "Who the hell are you?" Tarek twisted. The man yelped as his mug shattered on the floor. "Someone who doesn't like noise," Tarek replied calmly. For a heartbeat, the diner went still, except for the stove's hiss. Then a sharp voice cut through it. "Outside, both of you." Sheriff Cole Hardened stood near the door, eyes cold. Tarek released the man who stumbled away, cursing. June stood, frozen, her pulse hammering. When the miner finally staggered out, Rosa Vale wagged a finger at Tarek. "You break one more chair, I charge double." Tarek nodded. Once, his eyes flicking briefly to June. "Won't happen again." After he stepped outside, June leaned on the counter, steadying her breath. Rosa gave her a knowing smile. "You sure he's just a stable hand?" June shot her a look. "Don't start." That night the sky hung low and heavy. Thunder rolled far across the plains, promising rain that never came. June locked up the diner, rubbing her sore wrist. Outside, she found Tarek leaning against the corral fence, moonlight glinting off his knife as he shaved curls from a piece of wood. "You shouldn't have done that," she said. He didn't look up. "Done what?" Jumped in like that. "I could have handled him." He let out a quiet laugh. "Sure you could." She bristled. "I don't need rescuing. You keep saying that," he said, flicking the wood chip away. "But trouble keeps finding you." June crossed her arms. "Maybe it's just following you." He finally met her eyes, a faint trace of amusement there. "Could be." For a moment neither spoke. Dust and mesquite scented the air. Moonlight painted everything silver. She studied him, the scar near his collarbone, the hard line of his jaw, the way he stood so still, it felt like the land had shaped him. "You ever think," she said softly, "that fate's got a cruel sense of humor? Every time I try to start over, it throws you in my path." He smiled, not mocking but real, almost gentle. "Maybe fate's just trying to finish what we started." Her heart skipped. Before she could answer, thunder cracked closer and ash snorted. Tarek turned, scanning the dark. "Storm's coming," he said. "You should head inside. And you, I'll stay with the horses." "Still stubborn," she said. "Still talking," he replied. But there was warmth in it now. By dawn, rain finally came, a steady drizzle that softened the dust and filled the air with wet earth. June stepped outside the diner, watching water drum the corral rails. Tarek was already there, soaked, guiding Ash toward shelter. When he saw her, he nodded. "Morning, morning." She hesitated. "Coffee's on." He paused, then nodded. "I'll take some." Inside, they sat across from each other, steam rising from two chipped cups. For once, they didn't argue. Rain tapped the windows, and the sound eased the space between them. "Guess you were right," she said. "Trouble does keep finding me." "Guess I was wrong," he said quietly. "Maybe you just walked straight into it." June smiled, small, honest. "Maybe that's what I did 5 years ago." He looked up, meeting her gaze. She didn't look away. "Maybe I'm still walking." For the first time since the desert, he laughed low, rough, warm. Outside, the rain thickened, washing dust from the street. Neither said it aloud, but they both felt it. Whatever road they'd been on, it was the same one now. And though neither would admit it yet, Las Piedras had become the one place in the wide West where they both belonged, at least for a while. After the storm, summer heat returned with a vengeance. By noon, Las Piedras shimmered beneath a washed-out blue sky. The streets baked dry again, though a faint trace of rain still clung to the air, like a memory that refused to fade. June Calder was scrubbing the diner counter when two men in dust-coated coats pushed through the door. They weren't miners or ranch hands. Their boots were too clean, their eyes too sharp. They took a table near the back, leaning close, whispering while their gazes swept the room. Rosa Vale leaned in toward June. "You see those two?" Rosa murmured. "They asked about you." June's hands went still. "About me," Rosa nodded. "Said they're tied to Silas Crow's outfit. Looking for a runaway thief." June's stomach nodded. She forced a tight smile. Maybe they've got the wrong woman. But she knew better. Trouble had finally found her. That evening, as the sky bled red behind the hills, the same two men appeared again, this time outside, near the corral. Tarek stepped into their path before they reached the diner's back door. "Evening, boys," he said, calm but cold. Evening, one replied, resting his hand on the butt of his revolver. "We're looking for a woman named June Calder. You seen her?" Tarek tilted his head. "Depends who's asking. Crow's business partners. She stole something valuable." Tarek's mouth curved slightly. "Funny. Men who use rope and sunlight on women don't usually talk about value." The man's eyes narrowed. "You've got a smart mouth for an Indian." Tarek's voice dropped low and dangerous. "And you've got too many teeth for a hired gun." The second man moved first. His hand barely brushed his pistol before Tarek's boot slammed into his ribs, sending him sprawling in the dirt. The first man drew, but Tarek's revolver was already up, aimed dead center at his chest. "Tell Crow," Tarek said softly. "The desert's a long place to die for another man's greed." They left fast, dragging the fallen one with them, their horses kicking dust into the dying light. When Tarek turned back, June stood in the doorway, pale as moonlight. "They were asking about me," she whispered. "I gathered that. He won't stop, Tarek. Crow won't stop until he gets what he wants." "And what's that?" Her hand shook as she reached into her apron and pulled out a folded scrap of cloth. Inside lay a brittle map drawn in Edwin Calder's hand, edges yellowed, ink fading. "This," she said, "my father's map. The old silver vein under Mescalero Ridge. Crow killed him for refusing to sell." Tarek's eyes darkened. "He killed your father, or had it done," she said, staring at the paper. "He wants the land. What's buried beneath it? He'll destroy anyone who stands in his way." "And you kept this?" Tarek asked quietly. "All these years, it's all I had left of him." Tarek turned the map in his hands, tracing the faded lines. "This ridge," he said, tapping the page. "It cuts through Apache land. My father died trying to protect it." June met his gaze. "Then Crow took from both of us." Silence settled between them as the wind lifted dust at their feet. Two families, two deaths. One man's greed binding them together. "We have to go," Tarek said at last. "Go where? Somewhere Crow can't reach you. The hills may be farther." "I can't keep running." "Tarek," she said, "I've been running since the day I left you." His jaw tightened. "You left to run, remember?" Her temper flared. "I left to save you." He blinked, caught off guard. She stepped closer, the words spilling now, hot shaking. "They said they'd hang you, Crow's men. They said if I didn't disappear, they'd make you pay for my father's debts. I thought if I left, they'd leave you alone. I thought I was doing the right thing." For a heartbeat, only the wind answered. Then something shifted in Tarek's face, the hardness easing disbelief, breaking into something raw. "You left for me," she nodded, tears tightening her throat, "and I hated myself every day after." He turned away, dragging a hand through his hair, sharp and restless. "I spent years thinking you walked away because I wasn't enough. Half this, half nothing. I never thought that." He faced her again, voice low and rough. "But you made me believe it. I know, she whispered, and I'm sorry. They stood so close now she could see the dust caught in his lashes, the small scar near his lip, the one she remembered kissing on a night long gone. The space between them felt alive tight with things unsaid. Say something, she breathed. He stepped in until their foreheads nearly touched. 5 years, he said. 5 years, I hated you, June called her. And it turns out I was hating the wrong person. Before she could answer, his hand rose to her face, a calloused thumb, brushing her cheek, catching a tear, before it fell. She leaned into the touch, breath shallow. Then he kissed her. It wasn't gentle. It carried years of pain, misunderstandings, silence, everything buried too deep for too long. When they finally pulled apart, she was shaking. Far-off thunder rolled again over Mescalero Ridge. They left Las Piedras that night before Silas Crow's men could return. The desert opened ahead, silver beneath a rising moon, quiet but for hoofbeats and the whisper of wind. By dawn, they reached the foothills and made camp beneath a redstone ledge. June spread the map between them, tracing the lines with a trembling finger. This trail, she said, leads to an old mine shaft. My father hid papers there, deeds letters, proof Crow forged the contracts. Then that's where we go. Tarek said nothing more. As the sun climbed, painting the rock gold, June studied him. The anger that once shadowed his face was gone, replaced by something steadier, a quiet resolve. You never stopped fighting, she said softly. I stopped, once he replied. Didn't end well. She managed a small smile. Maybe this time it will. He didn't answer, but his eyes softened. Get some rest. I'll keep watch. She lay beside the fire, exhaustion pulling her under. Just before sleep took her, she whispered, You're not still angry. Tarek stared into the flame's voice, low. Angry, no. Just sorry we lost so much time. The storm broke that evening, a wild summer downpour sweeping from the mountains. Lightning split the ridge, thunder echoing through the canyons. They took shelter in a shallow cave, the fire sputtering between them. As rain hammered stone, June wrapped her shawl tighter, watching firelight dance across his face. You remember the first rain we shared? She asked. By the creek. He nodded. You said rain makes the desert bloom. Still true, she murmured. Even the driest places can bloom again. Tarek looked at her. Really looked. And for the first time in years, she saw peace in his eyes. Maybe that's us, he said. She smiled, tears mixing with rain. They sat in silence while the storm raged. When the thunder moved off, Tarek fed another branch to the fire and glanced at her. When the sky clears, we ride for Mescalero Ridge. And then, she asked. Then we finish what they started. Outside, the rain faded to a whisper and the first stars broke through. June leaned against him, listening to his heartbeat, steady, strong, the sound she'd thought she'd never hear again. For the first time in 5 long years, she wasn't running. Whatever waited on that ridge, justice, danger, or redemption, she would face it with him. And somehow that changed everything. Morning came gray and still, the air heavy with rain and dust. June woke to find Tarek already saddling Ash, the map tucked safely into his vest. The inked lines of Edwin Calder's hand burned into both their memories. The storm's moving east, Tarek said, scanning the horizon. We should ride before the ground turns to mud. June stood, brushing sleep from her eyes. You think Crow will follow us this far? He's too greedy not to. They rode in silence through narrow canyons, red rock glowing under the rising sun. The land felt ancient, quiet, watchful. Tarek knew every bend and hollow. His people had hunted these ridges long before fences cut the world apart. Even the wind seemed to whisper warnings through the sage. By noon, they reached the mouth of an old mine shaft, half collapsed, hidden behind a curtain of juniper. Air drifted out, smelling of iron and damp stone. This is it, June said, her voice small in the vast hush. Tarek dismounted, drawing his revolver. Stay close. Inside, the light fell to a rusty glow. They followed a narrow tunnel, boots crunching on gravel. The deeper they went, the colder the air became. After a few 100 feet, the tunnel widened into a cramped chamber held up by rotting timbers. A rusted lantern dangled from a nail long dead. June Calder knelt beside a mound of loose stone. He told me once, she said, breath tight, he hid the papers near a marker carved with a letter. She brushed dirt from the rock wall until a faint shape emerged, an old initial, her father's mark. Beneath it, tucked into a narrow crevice, lay a bundle wrapped in oilcloth. Her hands shook as she lifted it free. Tarek watched in silence while she unwrapped deeds, letters, and one official document bearing Silas Crow's forged signature. Proof. All of it. She breathed relief and grief colliding in her chest. We can clear my father's name. Yours too. Before Tarek could say more, a faint echo carried down the tunnel behind them. Voices. He stiffened. Riders. June's eyes widened. Crow's men. He must have followed our tracks. Tarek snatched the papers, shoved them inside his coat, and grabbed her hand. Move. They ran for the entrance, boots hammering the ground. The instant they burst into daylight, a rifle cracked sparks leaping from the rock beside them. June gasped, stumbling as Tarek dragged her behind a boulder. A dozen men fanned out across the slope, Crow's riders. Rifles flashing in the sun, and at their center sat Silas Crow himself, broad-shouldered, silver hair slicked back, his grin slick with certainty. Well now, Crow called, reining in his horse. Didn't expect to find you this easy. June stepped from cover, fury burning hotter than fear. You killed my father, Crow laughed. Your father was a fool who didn't know when to sell. You should have learned from him. Tarek's revolver was already up, but Crow raised a hand. Easy there, Greyhawk. I've got enough lead in my boys' guns to turn you into a sieve before you blink. Tarek's voice stayed level. Then why haven't you? Because I like a fair bargain, Crow said. Hand over the map and the papers, and maybe I let the girl live. June clutched Tarek's sleeve. Don't. He met her eyes, then looked back at Crow. You're lying. Maybe Crow shrugged. Maybe not. Lightning flashed over the ridge as the storm circled back. The air tasted of rain and gunpowder. Tarek's thumb brushed the hammer of his gun. Last chance, Crow said. Mine too, Tarek replied. The world exploded. Gunfire ripped through the stillness, echoing off the canyon walls. Tarek fired first, dropping the man nearest Crow. June ducked behind stone, heart slamming, smoke burning her lungs. Bullets chewed the rock around her. Tarek moved like the land itself, crouch, fire, vanish. 2 men went down before they could reload, but there were too many. Back, he shouted. Into the mine, they sprinted inside as more shots cracked outside. The tunnel shuddered with impacts. June stumbled, clutching the oilcloth bundle to her chest. Tarek yanked a lantern from the wall, sparked it alive, and turned to her. We'll take the other shaft. It opens near the ridge. Before they could move, a voice rolled down the tunnel. You can't run forever, Greyhawk. Crow's voice closer now. He'd followed them in. Tarek's jaw set. Stay behind me. They pushed deeper lantern light, throwing long twitching shadows. A shot rang out. The lantern shattered, plunging them into darkness. Tarek slammed June to the ground as a bullet screamed overhead. Another followed closer. Muzzle flashes lit the tunnel, revealing Crow's silhouette only yards away. Tarek fired once. The blast thundered through the mine. Crow staggered, clutching his shoulder, but stayed upright. You think you can kill me, half-breed? He hissed. You don't even know who owns this valley. I know who stole it, Tarek said. Crow laughed through the pain. You think killing me changes anything? The companies, the courts, they'll still take it all. Men like you, like her. He jerked his chin toward June. You'll always belong in the dirt. June's hands shook around the revolver Tarek had pressed into them earlier. She raised it, breath quavering. Maybe, she said, But at least we'll be standing on our own land. June Calder pulled the trigger. The blast thundered through the narrow tunnel, deafening in the close dark. Silas Crow dropped to his knees, shock warping his face. His revolver slipped from his hand and clanged against the stone. A heartbeat later, he pitched forward into the dirt, the light from his fallen lantern guttering once, then dying beside him. For a long moment, neither of them moved. Water dripped steadily from the ceiling as rain seeped through the cracks above. June lowered the gun, her chest heaving. "It's over." Tarek stepped to her side, resting a steady hand on her shoulder. "No," he said quietly. "It's just beginning." By the time they climbed out of the mine, the rain had stopped. Smoke curled up along the ridge where a stray bullet had struck a powder crate fire, racing through dry brush and climbing fast. The sky burned orange, the valley swallowed in a fierce glow. They rode hard through the narrow pass, heat pressing against their backs like a second sun. Behind them, the old mine gave way with a roar, the ground shuddering as the mountain claimed its dead. At the base of the ridge, they finally stopped, breath ragged. June turned to look back. The fire raged wild, but in its light, she felt something loosen inside her, grief cracking open. Rage and relief tangled together. Tarek followed her gaze. "That land's clean now," he said softly. "The lies died with him," she whispered, "and maybe the ghosts too." Rain began again, gentle and steady, hissing as it met flame, turning fire to steam. Tarek reached for her hand and she took it. Together they watched the last smoke drift into a gray sky, the ridge glowing like a forge at dawn. The past was burning away along with the weight that had kept them apart. Autumn crept slowly into Mescalero country. The blaze left blackened trees and a smoke-sour scent that lingered for weeks. But when the rains returned, green pushed through, ash sage and mesquite, stubborn as hope. By then June and Tarek had built a small cabin at the ridge's base, 2 rooms, a porch, and a view of the old creek that had nearly been their grave. The land still bore scars, but the soil was rich again, and clear water threaded over stone. Tarek spent his days working the corral behind the cabin, breaking mustangs for trade. June taught the children of nearby settlers and a few Apache families who came down from the reservation. Her chalkboard leaned against the porch wall, the alphabet scrawled in uneven lines by small hands. Most evenings they sat outside as the sky turned gold over the hills. They spoke little. They didn't need to. The first October chill drifted in one morning when Tarek came back from the barn with a saddle blanket over his shoulder. June was hanging laundry, her hair lifting in the breeze. He paused, watching her, the same woman who'd once ridden into his life like a storm and somehow stayed. "You're staring," she said without turning. "Just wondering how you keep that dress white after a dust storm," he replied dryly. She laughed, a sound he never tired of hearing. Trade secret. He stepped closer, brushing a loose strand from her cheek. "You like it here?" She looked toward the ridge, where smoke no longer rose. "It feels like a place that can start over." He nodded. "Then it's good enough." That afternoon, Sheriff Cole Harden rode up with 2 deputies. Tarek met them at the gate, hand resting near his holster out of old habit. "Morning," Tarek Harden said, tipping his hat. "Didn't mean to startle you." "You didn't?" Tarek replied, "Just used to men coming here with less manners." Harden dismounted, boots crunching on dry ground. "Word came in from Santa Fe. The court reviewed the papers. Miss Calder turned over your father's deeds, the letters. They're calling it what it is. Now," he continued, "fraud, murder, theft." He glanced toward June, standing on the porch. "Crow's holdings are being returned to the families he stole from. His men scattered." "You're free," Harden said. "Both of you." June smiled faintly. "Thank you, Sheriff. I wasn't sure I'd ever hear that." "You earned it," Harden said. "And for what it's worth, Nokai would have been proud." Tarek's eyes lifted at the name. "You knew him." "Knew of him?" Harden answered. "He stood his ground when most wouldn't. Guess the apple didn't fall far." When the sheriff rode off, dust curling behind the horses, June turned to Tarek. "No, Kai." He looked toward the hills, his voice quiet. "My father. They killed him on this land. He tried to protect the springs from Silas Crow's men." June Calder stepped closer and took Tarek's hand. "Then we did right by him." Tarek nodded slowly, eyes fixed on the horizon. "Maybe now Nokai can rest." After that, the days began to ease into something gentler. The cabin filled with small, steady comforts, the soft creak of the porch swing, the smell of coffee at first light, the quiet sound of June humming while she worked through her lesson books. Sometimes children from the reservation came down with small gifts, beads, feathers, fresh bread wrapped in cloth. Tarek carved them toy horses, in return the same way his father once had for him. For the first time in a long while, the world seemed to settle. One evening, when the air sharpened with winter's approach, June stood by the creek washing a tin cup. Sunlight struck the water, turning it bright and fleeting. She felt him before she heard him. "Sky's red tonight," Tarek said. "Cold's coming. Then we'll light 2 fires," she answered. He smiled. "You always plan ahead. Someone has to." She turned toward him, her voice softer. "You know I used to hate this creek. Why?" "It reminded me of the worst day of my life." She paused, watching the water slide over the stone. "And now it reminds me that some things survive no matter how dry it gets." Tarek nodded. "That's this land. It breaks you first, then teaches you how to live." June brushed her fingers against his. "And what's it teaching you now?" He thought for a moment. "That peace isn't something you find. It's something you choose." Her smile was quiet, but it lingered. Winter came in slow and cold. Frost filmed the window panes and smoke drifted from the chimney like a low song. The mustangs grew thick winter coats, pawing at frozen ground. One night, with the wind howling down from the ridge, June woke to Tarek's voice outside. She stepped onto the porch shawl, pulled tight. He stood by the fence staring up at the stars. "Can't sleep?" she asked. He shook his head. "Just thinking." "About what?" He hesitated, then turned to her. "About how we got here. About how close I came to walking away again." She descended the steps, frost crunching under her bare feet. "But you didn't." "No," he said, breath clouding. "This time I stayed." They stood together watching the ridge. Moonlight draped it in silver, softening the scars left by fire. June spoke quietly. "You ever wonder what would have happened if we hadn't found each other again?" Tarek answered slowly. "No. I think we would have anyway. Fate or something like it." He smiled faintly. "A creek that runs dry still remembers where it once flowed." She leaned her head against his shoulder, the cold forgotten. Spring returned with the thaw. Hills turned green again, wildflowers spilling over slopes where fire had burned. The creek ran stronger than before, its voice sure and steady. One morning, June stood by the fence, holding a letter. Tarek was mending tack nearby when she called out, "It's from Rosa Vale." He glanced up. "From the diner. She says the children in Las Piedras want me back teaching this summer. She's even talking about a proper schoolhouse." Tarek set his tools aside, wiping his brow. "You want to go? I thought maybe we both could. You could trade horses. I could teach." He studied her for a long moment, then smiled. "You really think they're ready for an Apache horse trader and a runaway woman setting up shop?" She laughed. "They'll learn." He shook his head, grinning. "Then I guess we'll give them something worth talking about." June stepped closer, resting her hand against his chest. "You sure?" He covered her hand with his own, pressing it to his heartbeat. "I'm sure about you." That evening, as the sun dipped behind Mescalero Ridge, they sat on the porch, with a pot of coffee between them. The air was sweet with mesquite bloom. High above, a hawk circled its cry sharp and clean against the wide sky. Tarek watched it for a long while. "My father used to say," he murmured, When a hawk crosses running water, Tarek said softly, "It means the land has been forgiven." June Calder followed his gaze, her eyes bright in the fading light. "Then maybe it's forgiving us too." He turned to her, a small smile easing his mouth. "No, June, it's blessing us." The hawk dipped its wing once, then slipped into the sinking sun. Below them, the creek murmured its song, old and unending. And beneath the shadow of Mescalero Ridge, where fire once tore through stone and love was lost and found again, peace finally settled, quiet, deep, and enduring. For the first time in 5 long years, the land, the water, and 2 hearts that had survived it all belonged to one another again. Thank you for listening all the way to the end. If this story touched you, please leave a like, share it with someone you care about, and subscribe so you don't miss the next ride across the frontier. And tell me in the comments, what did you think of the ending? I'll see you in the next story, when the western sun rises again, carrying another chance for hope. All stories are created for entertainment purposes and may include fictional elements or dramatized interpretations inspired by historical settings. We use AI tools, voiceover, visuals, scripts as creative assistants. However, all content is reviewed, refined, and edited by humans to ensure emotional authenticity and storytelling quality. We fully comply with YouTube's policies regarding AI-generated content and do not use any deep-fake techniques or misleading recreations of real individuals. All visuals and supporting materials are properly licensed. Sharing, re-uploading, modifying, or distributing any part of this content in any form requires written permission. We appreciate your support and respect for original creative work